Hey, welcome to Join the Search on Air. I am Jess with Join the Search to End Violent Conflict. Join the Search is a global movement mobilizing millions of young people to end violent and destructive conflict in our own communities and worldwide. We believe every generation has a role to play in finding constructive solutions to the world problems. So if you agree and you want to join us, it's free to join. Just sign the pledge at endviolentconflict.org. And you'll get special access to awesome people and events, just like our Join the Search on Airs. So today's Join the Search on Air is titled Far From Home. You might not know this, but today is World Refugee Day. There are over 43.7 million refugees and internally displaced people in the world, making the number of people displaced by violent conflict at its highest since World War II. This is according to the New York Times article today. So today we are lucky enough to have three incredible African refugee speakers with us today. All of them have experience being a refugee and are currently working to help refugees just like them. They all have inspiring but very different journeys. So we're actually working right now to get our third one on the line. We've been having some technical difficulties, but hopefully he'll be able to join us today. So I'd like to welcome the one that will hopefully be joining us very soon as we figure out his account, is Abraham Lino, who is a country representative at American Refugee Committee and has been working with displaced people in the DRC for 12 years. And he himself was a refugee from Sierra Leone. We also have Mohyeldin Mohamed, who is one of the 50 delegates for the US National Refugee Congress, representing North Dakota. And he is currently interning with a senator and has just graduated from college, so congratulations, and is a former Darfur refugee from RefugePoint. And RefugePoint is the one that actually helped him settle here in the US. And then last but not least, we have Dermogary, who fled what is now South Sudan and lived as a refugee in Egypt with his wife until him and his wife were granted entrance into the U.S. under the State Department's refugee program. And they now live in Wheaton, Illinois, where Dermomo works with World Relief and is a pastor of local Sudanese church. So thank you all for joining us so much. We're so happy that you're here with us today. Now, for all of you that are watching, that are tuned in, we'll be taking your questions live. So just go ahead, type your questions in the Q&A box, and you will also be able to join the conversation on Twitter if you use the hashtag JTS on air. We're going to ask you to try to be understanding and sensitive in your questions. These are brave men with us today, but that are willing to share their story, but that doesn't make it easy. So with us today, thank you so much, Dermo and Morehe, for being here with us today.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you. So the way we're probably going to do this today is we're going to kind of go through everybody's story at first, and then we're going to kind of open it to a panel of questions that and see what you guys think. So first, let's start with Morehe. Morehe, can you tell us a little bit about your story? What was life like before you're a refugee, and what caused you to leave your country?
First of all, thank you so much for having me today. I am delighted to be here with you, and I'm really happy to share my journey with you in this special day for refugees, for over 40-some million refugees who live in this world. So I'm really happy, and I'm really glad to share with you my story. Basically, I am from Sudan. I was born in Sudan. I partially grew up in Sudan, and I had a normal life as a kid. Like any other kid, I had very loving family. I had 2 brothers and 1 sister. I had a great time. I went to school there, elementary school, high school. I started college, and then the war in Darfur escalated, and my dad's hometown was bombed, and then I had to flee and go to Kenya. So I mean, life before I was a refugee was normal. It was, just like any other kid. And when I went to Kenya, it was completely different. But yeah, basically, I had a normal life, and I had a beautiful life, and I had a loving, really loving family. So
Thank you, Morehe. So, what is it that caused you to leave? Can you describe the situation, even the day that you left, possibly?
Well, absolutely. As you know, I am from Sudan, and as I mentioned, Darfur, and Sudan had one of the longest like civil wars of the 20th century. We had we never experienced like stability for a long period of time. So anyway, what caused me to leave Sudan was the genocide in Darfur. I just started college when genocide started in Darfur, and we started to protest, we started to demonstrate, we started to bring students come together to put pressure on the government of Sudan so they can stop killing people in the region of Darfur. And you know the government didn't accept the idea that we're coming together and we're trying to protest, we're trying to bring a light into what was taking place in Darfur. So for that reason, some of us got jailed and some of us got killed. By that time, I was in Khartoum City, and yeah, so I had to flee. I was in a danger. Some of my friends actually got killed because of what they were trying to do, and some of my friends and we went to South Sudan, and then from South Sudan, we crossed to Kenya.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing with us. Um, what was your first impression when you actually arrived at the refugee camp in Kenya?
Uh, it was crazy. When I went to Kenya, Kakuma refugee camp. I think Kakuma is like the world's like largest refugee camp. So it has like hundreds of thousands of refugees from a lot of African and Middle Eastern countries. So when I arrived, I was welcomed by Sudanese community, and I was welcomed by the refugees who live there. They had a lot. They had like a little problem with the local population, like the Kenyan, but they had like, but relatively they were able to live together. But describing life inside refugee camp is just crazy. I have seen people who were born in refugee camp and they grew up in refugee camp and they turn into their 20s in the refugee camp. So they don't know anything about like where their family came from. Like I have seen people from South Sudan, they were there since 1992 actually. They don't know anything about Sudan. So, and they live there for the rest of their lives. I mean, it's just very difficult to go there and see those kind of people. That's one thing. The second thing is like education is not as it's supposed to be in the refugee camp. Plus, you can generally basic needs are just not there. Education, health. I mean, all those basic needs are just not enough. It's not as it should be. So people live in a refugee camp, and they are in a refugee camp, but it's still they are not safe as they should be. I mean, it's just it's very difficult. I mean, life in refugee camp is just very difficult.
Hmm. So, how were you able to make it out and come to the U.S.? What was the situation that allowed you to do that?
Well, after living for I think 6 months or seven in refugee camp, I decided to go to Nairobi because I was in college and I thought I would need to continue my education, and there was no chance. Living in a refugee camp, you won't be able to do anything. I mean, I decided to go to Nairobi. I went to Nairobi. I was homeless in Nairobi. I met RefugePoint by chance. There was a guy told me that there is organization. They help refugees and just go there and see if they can help you. I went there and I met a lady named Jaylene, I think, and she was walking outside of the office and I talked to her. I couldn't speak English by then, definitely. I just started, I know some words, and she was like, "Where are you from?" And I told her I'm from Sudan, and she was like, "Okay, why don't you come back tomorrow and I will find someone to help translate and then see what we can do." And yeah, the next day I showed up and she was there. She brought a translator and we were together. And I told them why I left Sudan and what happened to me and what happened to my family and what is taking place in Sudan. And they were like, well, we will work with you and see if we can help you to go to the States. And yeah, here I am. So
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So, okay, so we have still a lot more questions for you, Morehe, but we're going to go to Dermomo now
sure.
and get his story before we kind of create this panel of experts here on this. So, Dermomo, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're
We're
welcome.
so glad to have you with us. So you also came from Sudan, but is now South Sudan, and so it'll be interesting to kind of hear how your stories are similar and maybe a little bit different. Can you tell us a little bit about your story? What was life like for you before you're a refugee, and then what caused you to leave?
Oh, sure. Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me today. Of course, I was born and raised in Sudan, which the part that is South Sudan today. Growing up as a kid, I knew very well that I was not a normal kid because I felt like I was not a first citizen like everyone else in my country. Um, and that was clear even in the school settings, wherever I go. And I knew very well that how much I do, I won't be like everyone else. And that system has been going there for a long time. But the actual problem with me personally, it started when I was in college. And around that time, still the war in the south is going on. And what was happening is every time the rebels captured a place, the security would come in and just take a bunch of students and lock them in. And at some point they took some people who were very close to me, and I knew that my name was on the list. So I had to make an option, either to leave, to stay in Sudan and lose my life as many of my friends did, or I have to leave the country. And honestly, leaving the country was not an option for me at all. Home is home, and there is no place like home. But at some point, I have to hide, and one of the profs in college accepted me in his house for 3 months. And at the end of the 3 months, he told me that if I really want to leave, I have to leave the country. If I really care about my life, I have to leave the country. And I thought about it, which it wasn't an option for me at all to think even about it. But at that point, I do want to leave. I don't want to lose my life. So I decided to leave the country that time.
Wow, but that's we can't even imagine. Can you? So obviously this was very hard for you to leave. What? So what happened after? Where did you go?
I left Sudan. I headed towards Egypt, and as some of you may know, that in Egypt there is no refugee camp. The government won't allow to do that. So basically, you have to find a place to live. You have to rent an apartment. You have to look for a job. You have to compete. You have to compete with the Egyptians to look for a job, and knowing that there are not so many jobs in Egypt, unemployment is so high. But it's still, as a refugee, you have to go there, look for whatever job you can find to make money to survive.
And who was the first person you met when you left Sudan? Do you
You
remember
mean
that?
in Egypt or in U.S.?
In Egypt.
The first person I met was, a bunch of Sudanese. When you arrive at the train station, there just people come around just hanging to see if there are some new arrivals coming from Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So probably the first people I met, I did not know who they were. I don't know them at all. Just a bunch of strangers. And then after that, I was able to meet someone that I knew from Sudan.
And how were you generally treated by Egyptians in the country? Was there any kind of stigma there?
Egypt is a tough place to live in, and living in Egypt as a sub-Saharan African, that alone is a problem by itself. And teasing people on the street. I have been pushed by little kids. I have been stoned. I have been insulted. That has become a daily life that we go through. So you cannot stay home. You have to get out to find a job. But when you are on the street, you run through so many problems as well. But there is no option to go through it every single day.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us about your journey to the U.S.?
My journey to the U.S. of course, we boarded a plane from Cairo. I landed in New York, but it happened to be on a Halloween day, which it was horrible experience, honestly, to go through. I never heard about Halloween. I never knew what it was, and we landed in New York. And with these people dressing up costumes, some of them look like evil spirits. And so, it was tough for me, but it was even tougher for my wife, who kept asking me, honey, what is this? Honey, what is that? And I said, you know what? This is America. They worship devils. Just let's go. I have nothing to say except that.
I can't even imagine. Can't even imagine what that was like. So, but eventually you were able to settle. So then, did you go to Chicago? Can you tell us about kind of how you settled and how your life is now?
Oh yeah, of course. We flew from New York to Chicago, and then from Morehe straight away to Carroll Stream, a western suburb of Chicago. And it was winter. It was not really winter, but for me it was cold still. It was in November, and I was really shocked. I did not see too many people in the streets. I just arrived from Cairo, Egypt, okay, and I'm here in Carroll Stream. That was my first shock, and to adjust not seeing too many people on the street was a problem for me too. I kept asking, where are the people here? Where have they gone? And those who were around me kept telling me, no, they're here. We do have people. I was telling them there are no people here.
I can imagine. So now going back to you, Morehe. So obviously, Dermomo's first experience in the U.S. impression was probably a jarring one to say the least. Coming in Halloween night to New York, what was your first experience like coming to the U.S., Morehe?
Well, I didn't come on the Halloween day, so but I came to Fargo, North Dakota. I mean, when I landed here, I came in April. It was kind of like cold, but not that cold. Winter, summer was, it was in the summer, at the beginning of summer. I had a great time until it was winter, when it started to snow, and I never seen snow in my life. I mean, I just saw it here in Fargo. The first time I seen something like white thing just falling, I was like, what is that? People started telling me, well, this is snow. And I loved it at the beginning. It was, this very like pretty looking, and I went out and I played with it, but when it got crazy and when it was windy and all the things, I was like, oh my god, this is just crazy. So, but I mean, Fargo is just one of the good places. It's a very small town. People are really loving down here. People are very friendly. People the area itself is kind of like a safe area, and it's a good place for me to go to school and get to know people and establish basic, friendship and all those things. So I mean, I don't know. I don't think I faced any difficulties living here in Fargo, North Dakota. So I think it's a good place, and I think I welcome very well by those people. So.
Oh, good. And so we have Abraham on the line with us now. So welcome, Abraham. I'm sorry about all of that. I'm so glad you could join us today.
Thank you. I have a friend who says nature has a good sense of humor, so it had to happen.
Okay, good. Good. So just to refresh everybody's memory, Abraham is the country representative for the American Refugee Committee, and he's also been working with displaced people in the Congo. So Abraham, in the beginning part of the show, we heard stories from Dermomo and Morehe about kind of their situation with becoming refugees, and now we kind of want to give you a chance to tell your story as well before we get into some of these more general questions. So Abraham, can you tell us a little bit about your story? What was life like for you before you were a refugee, and what caused you to leave your country?
Well, thank you, Jessica. I am a refugee from Sierra Leone, and before the war in Sierra Leone in 1991, I had a very good childhood life. I had a good family. I had love in the home, and I still remember the days when I played with my mom. We played household games, and I was going to school normally like any other kid. And at the age of 16, So the war in Sierra Leone started in the place where I was. And my refugee life started when I was a teenager. And you can imagine seeing the refugee situation through the eyes of a teenager. It was a walk from my hometown to cross over into Guinea. We had to cross over the River Moa. So there is a river that goes around Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, and it forms a Mano River Union. And that's the river we had to cross through. Some family members were left back, but we had to go. Mom and some siblings of mine had to cross over into Guinea. And that was the first. We didn't have a refugee camp, so we had to build one. Once we got there, we were received by a church, and there was a small school where they had some benches that we put together, and my family was given a space, and that was our home for a while until the UNHCR came in, and they gave us some coupons, and they gave you 2 tools. So they gave you something to dig and something to cut with. So you went in the bush, cut your own stakes, cut your own bush rope, and they gave you a rubber tarpaulin, and you pitched up your tent. So that was how my refugee life started, and that was over into Guinea.
Wow. And so now you have a very interesting story, and I know it's gone a long time. Can you talk a little bit about your journey from that point when you're in Guinea to like how did you come to be on the American Refugee Committee?
Well, it's a long story, but I will try to make it short. Staying in Guinea, we had to move into to different regions or different areas. Some things that are very particular with refugees, we always look for familiar surroundings. So we always have the thought that, okay, this is going to be just a day and we're going to go back. So everybody sat along the river bank. We didn't want to move away. We didn't want to go even 5 kilometers, but it became too dangerous. The shelling from our country, from Sierra Leone, came right into the place where we were, and because some of the rebels didn't know the border areas, they even would cross and attack refugees or steal youth to take them back to fight. So we had to move. My family had to move. There was no school, and for 4.5 years, I did not go to school at all because there was no grade that will accommodate the level that I was in. And so my family had to move a couple of times. One of the things that was also a defining moment for me was during this period that we didn't have any supplies or any food stuff. The only thing we got to live by was my mom selling her jewelry one at a time. So she would, take off her earrings and say, we all will cry around the earrings and say, okay, this is what goes next. And then it will have to be the necklace, it will have to be the bracelet. And once that was over, me and my siblings, my elder brothers, we decided to take matters into our own hands. And if you go around Africa, you will see a lot of kids selling fuel in bottles on the street. That was my job. For a couple of years, that's what I sold. I would go and find someone who has like a fueling station, and I would tell them to give me 20 liters, and whatever I sold, maybe get $1 out of it. That dollar plus whatever my brother is doing on the other side, maybe towing some porting activities, carrying luggage for people. That's what we brought home, and we used that to eat. So for a couple of years, those were our activities up until when my dad is a religious person, and he was a preacher, so he was quite known in the region even before the war. And when some people heard that he was around in the refugee camps, they formed what we call the International Church. So this was basically a place where refugees met to get news from back home. It was more of a social gathering than a church, but he happened to be the pastor then, and I learned to play piano and played in the church there for a couple of years. But then the war followed us because the spillover from Liberia and Sierra Leone war got also into some parts of Guinea where we had stayed, and then we had to flee, and some family members had to run away, and some people ended up in different locations. So that's how my journey. I went back into Sierra Leone to continue schooling, and then the coup for the military in 1995 to 1997 happened, and I was in between Sierra Leone because I didn't have a French orientation, so I didn't want to stay into Guinea to change everything, change language, and go back to school into French. I was just not able to do that immediately. But finally, that's what I ended up doing, and my family, my parents had moved back into Sierra Leone, and some of my siblings had moved here. In the refugee camps, I met someone that was my girlfriend and now my wife, and she had moved over to the US. So I knew that my cause was, going to come to this direction one day. And for about 3 years in our courtship, or 3 to 4 years, we stayed courting. And one day I was working in Liberia with the American Refugee Committee, and then I moved I went to the embassy and got a visa, and that's how I started coming to the U.S.
Okay, wonderful. And to kind of go with the spirit here, what was your first impression when you got over here to the U.S.?
It was very interesting, but also strange. We do hear quite a lot about the U.S. when you're back in Africa, and there's a lot of expectation. But one of the shocks for me was the fact that everybody was closed up in their houses. The first thing I wanted to do was like say hello to everyone. That's how you do back home. And I think that felt strange for a very long time, because whenever you said hello, someone is going to look at you like, oh, what is wrong with you? Wrong with you? Why do you just go about saying hello to everyone? Of course, the culture of shaking hands in West Africa, I had to learn to put my hands in my pocket so I don't have to shake every hand. And yeah, I heard my friends talking about their experience in winter, and that was a huge shock for me as well. I usually back home I would say I love the cold more than the heat, but that was just so much cold than I had expected. So I did try to make some friends immediately. I like going out and hanging out with people. So for me, I was able to find a church. And that helped a lot, because in the church I was able to join the choir and get into the music group. That helped me to at least find some few people that I can, start talking to, apart from the family that hosted me immediately.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So we definitely have some similarities and some differences between all of the stories. It sounds like for all of you, the cold was definitely a shock coming to the U.S. On the other side, it's interesting. We have 2 of you that left as college students and 1 of you as a teenager. So so for some of these questions now, I'll kind of pose them to the group and have you and see what you guys think. But I'll start this question with Morehe. So we'll go back to you. So going back to that time in Darfur, what do you think was the hardest thing? To leave behind, and why?
Well, to me, of course, my family. That's #1 thing, and the second thing is education and the country in general. I mean, in my family, I was the only person who was lucky to make it to college, and I was just starting college when this problem took place. I mean, genocide started a long time before I was in high school, or yeah, because it was in 2003 when the genocide in Darfur started. So when I went to college, I felt the need to do something about it. So we came together, as I mentioned earlier, that we tried to pressure the Sudanese government to do something about it. So some of the people in my hometown, they were kind of like disappointed because I was sent to go to school, and suddenly I was being part of a group protesting and trying to put pressure on the government. So, I mean, to me, it was just difficult to see myself getting out of college and being in a refugee camp, leaving the country, leaving my family, my friends, and I don't know what would happen to them immediately after, you leave the country. You would not know what they are going to go through. So all the things are really difficult, but I now I can look back and say, thank I am in the U.S. and I can be able to be in touch with them, and I see things are getting better. But yeah, generally speaking, my family, my community where I grew up. I mean, as Dromo, is that how you say your name? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
But as he mentioned, I mean, nothing like home, where you grew up, where you had, your childhood, where you have friends, you have relatives, and all those things. You just suddenly you are forced to leave it behind. So, I mean, those are really hard things for me. Still, I reflect and see, and I feel, yeah, I mean, basically, those are the things that really important for me, and they are really hard to leave behind.
Mm-hmm. Momo, is there anything you'd want to add to that about what's tough leaving behind?
Yeah, what I would like to say here is, being an African, being a Sudanese, we are attached to our land. So I have a piece of land that I believe is part of me, and I'm part of that land as well. In the U.S. you can move to different states for 2 years. You can even run for a public office. That's not the case for us in Africa. My land is my land, and I belong to it, and it belongs to me. So when you force me to leave my land, I'm leaving myself behind. So I'm here physically, but spiritually, whatever, I'm not here at all. I'm still back there in that piece of land. And for me, leaving that land behind me, leaving the community, leaving the people, leaving the culture, it is a problem. As Abraham said, I am used to shake people's hand every single day. I cannot do that here. That is a problem for me. And when I wake up in the morning and live in an apartment complex, it doesn't belong to me. It's not my land. But that is the biggest challenge. It is really hard just to see myself being here. I have no land here in the U.S. And I will not have a land here because my land is back in Africa. Just kidding.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Dermo. That's such an interesting perspective that I think a lot of people do not understand or necessarily relate to in such a passionate way. Abraham, is there anything you'd want to add to the hardest thing for you to leave behind?
Absolutely. I think they've touched on family, and I will not go there because, we understand the concept of family in Africa it goes beyond just the nuclear family. It's also all the other siblings, extended people that you grow up with. And so the idea of a family, my colleagues have dealt in widely. What I want to talk is one thing that affected me the most. When you are 16 and you're trying, these are ages where you dream. You dream anything. I want to be a pilot. I want to be an engineer. I want to be this. I want to be that. And for your life to just go from expecting or thinking wild to being reduced to a wall, even if it's a virtual wall in a refugee camp, that was just a huge shock for me. And what that did to me was then trying to redefine my identity. Who am I? If I have to just say a little bit, what that did to me was, for example, I came at an age where I had a passport, but then that passport expired when I was a refugee. And I had no way of renewing that passport. So I lost that identity. I tried to go back to get that passport renewed, and even where I would go to do an interview, they would not recognize me as a Sierra Leonean. So part of my story today, in my family, you have different nationalities. I can tell you at least 3 nationalities. So in the same family, you have different names because either your family has been, some of your siblings that got lost were adopted by somebody and they have a different family name. So I have my kids or some family members, my nephews, asking, but why are you this? Why are you called this? And isn't my dad your brother? But why is he called this? Why is he a Sierra Leonean and why are you a Guinean? So it's hard to explain because some of the kids that were born in the refugee camps of my own, some of my siblings that were born as refugees don't know anywhere else except that refugee camp and wherever they ended up being. So the issue of identity, it has stuck with me. It's one that haunts me. It's one that, has redefined my life in ways that I had not wished for or that I had never expected.
Thank you guys for sharing the identity, the land, family. I mean, there's so much that has to be left behind when situations like this arise. And I know most of you are still involved with other refugees and working with refugees. What are some of the biggest challenges for refugees, do you think, nowadays? And, you know, what are also challenges that are in these refugee camps? And we can start with Morehe on this.
In refugee camps, as I was saying, I lived in Kakuma refugee camp. Kakuma refugee camp is the world's largest refugee camp, and basically there's a lot of challenges in refugee camp. People who live in refugee camp, unfortunately, they are not able to receive basic needs of life. I mean, as I was saying, education is not available as it should be for people who live in those places. Health, I mean, I don't know. In general, it was just very difficult to see people doing nothing. They, not because they don't want to do anything, but because there is no opportunities for them to do anything. If you live in, you know, in Egypt or other countries where there is no refugee camps, you will somehow you will find your way, even though it's difficult, as he talked about Egypt and trying to find a job and all the things. But I mean, in a refugee camp, people, it was just difficult for me to be there. I wake up in the morning, do nothing. I have nothing to do. Whether I try to read a book or I try to go play soccer, or but what else I can do? I mean, there is no schools to go to. There is no like public places where you can go and do whatever you wanted to do. So it's really difficult. I would encourage organizations and the UN and all those people who care about humanity to look at this issue seriously, because you're having a whole generation that is disconnected to their countries, and unfortunately where they live they are not able to receive the basic needs of life. I mean, people leave their countries to go to those places. Yes, they go there because they wanted to save their lives. Also, they are looking for better opportunities. I mean, those opportunities are not there in the refugee camp. I understand someone is not going to a refugee camp to live there because that's just a temporary thing. But hopefully, they should be able to receive what they need down there, like anybody else. I mean, refugee camp in Kenya, that's where I lived, and that's what I can speak about, is just horrible. I mean, the situation is horrible. I have seen kids who are dying because of lack of simple things. They die from preventable diseases in the refugee camp, and you see those huge UN cars. They come over and they just stay for hours and just leave, and you just wonder where are those people and why they were here and what they're doing. I don't know. I feel like the UN itself is somehow disconnected to refugee camps. They, I don't know how to describe this situation. Like, I never seen someone from the UN being part of the refugee camp and coming to the communities and staying with them inside the community and listening to their problems and trying to offer them help. So you can see people come over in those big cars and they just leave. You don't know what they're doing, and you talk to community leaders and they themselves don't know what's going on. So I mean, it's really difficult. Life in refugee camp is just not something anybody would like to wish for themselves. So.
Thank you for sharing, Morehe. Now I'm going to throw it over to Abraham. So you work in refugee camps in the DRC. So what are some common challenges you see there, and what are you trying to do to help?
Well, I work for the American Refugee Committee, and part of what we do, and before even talking about what we do, I want to go back a little bit to what he said. I think the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues, is that we should stop seeing refugees as numbers. They are people. Most times it's just a statistics game. It's somebody trying to play numbers, how many came in, how many came out, went out. how many live in here, what do they, it's just a game of numbers, and it has to go beyond that. Well, some of the things that were quite shocking when I went, I have been to many of these places, including Darfur, where these guys, some of my colleagues come from, to Kenya, Pakistan, Liberia, Ethiopia. So I've worked in many of these places, and I've looked at, the refugee situations. And for the most part, one is dignified living. There has to be some more effort into giving people dignity for where they have to spend some part of their lives. In the Congo, in the DRC, for example, the camps that I had visited during the time of the M23 fighting in Goma and in Ruchuru and these places, the conditions were just horrible. And even the humanitarian assistance that was given, it was really not just adequate, because we don't expect all the resources to be available, but also appropriate. How do you give a plastic sheeting, folded plastic sheeting, to a lady, a female household leader? She is leading her household, and then you expect her to find the ropes, you expect her to find the stakes to go and cut it, and she's leaving all the rest of the children to go into the bushes, and just by the edge of the wall of the refugee camp, there are the same rebels or the same armed groups that are causing rapes into the camps. But then we give, and we expect these people to survive. We give them, some of this kind of gifts or some of this kind of material that require some other resources, complementary resources that have to come along, but we don't really think further down the line. So it's more of saving a face. And what we try to do a little bit with the American Refugee Committee is also to look at what are the existing opportunities around the camps, so that people feel a little bit belonged. I think with some I know that in some places it's not as easy to negotiate for land, but in some countries there is a possibility to negotiate for land. Negotiate the land and let people do agriculture. That's what they know. Let them feel like their day is not just counting hours, but that they can be productive. Education, we are missing a huge opportunity in education. One thing that I said in one of the programs that we implemented somewhere, there was a lot of community fighting, and one of the programs we did was to build a community school where these ethnic tensions, or these kids from different ethnic groups, would come together to work to study. Now, I said in my own analysis, if these kids go from kindergarten all the way to wherever that education standards state level stops, there is a strong chance that those ones will never take a knife against each other. Because I still remember my first grade friends, and they are my friends till death. You ask me, like, who is your friend? Who do you miss? Even when I had a chance to go look for people around after the war, they were among the numbers that I wanted to see, those that I wanted to see. So we're missing out on the opportunity for consolidating peace. We just let the children roam around. There is no sort of education. There is no sort of, cohesion, community cohesion. And that's an opportunity that we have, that everybody in that same wall, protected by the same laws, governed by the same refugee status, refugee rules, can at least have an opportunity to consolidate the peace that they will be able to take back to their communities. So these are some of the opportunities that we have been missing out on. And what American Refugee Committee is doing in Congo is a bit unique also, is trying to bring back dignity into the humanitarian effort. So asking people, what can we do, instead of just imposing or some sort of dictating what we think they should have. But what do you have? If you have your energy to work, because sometimes we just think that refugees are lazy, they can't work, they don't, they have no desire to improve themselves, they're just there sitting to wait. But if we involve them to say, all right, are you willing to use your energy? If we find you a land, if we find you a space where you can go to work, if we find you some business opportunity, are you willing to engage in that? And you find people coming out, and that's what they do. And their life keeps for the next, generation that they will stay in those camps. At least they will feel useful that they have done something with their lives.
Thank you so much for sharing, Abraham. Dignity is, is one thing that we're going to walk away from with this. I think is so hugely important. Duramomo, now back to you. So we've heard about the refugee camp. So now let's talk about some of the challenges just being a refugee without a refugee camp, trying to figure out how to survive. And then I know that you're working with other refugees in the U.S. So what are some of the challenges that these refugees face that are outside refugee camps? And how do you propose to help them, and how are you helping them?
The thing here is when we talk about refugees, of course we have a bunch of programs to help refugees when they're in the U.S. or out of their home countries. What I would like to say is a refugee is just a normal human being before becoming a refugee, because oftentimes when we talk about programs, we call it refugee programs. And sometimes we forget that we are setting this program for just a normal human beings like you and me. And what we need to look into it is these people have left so much behind them. We don't think about the trauma that they have been through. And here in the U.S., for instance, we don't, because if you come as an engineer to U.S., then you can work as an engineer right away here. And you have to end up doing the minimum job that you will find it. And we don't think the psychological effect of that thing on a refugee who is here and he has to take the job. And of course he will take the job because he wants to feed his family, he wants to provide for his family. While doing that, I believe is we need to think about better mental health program for them. Because even though this person is doing this job, and we know very well that his background is more qualified than what he's doing today. So is there any way we can help them? Is there any way that we can help this person, coach him to be able to do what he was doing back home? Some of them do speak good English. Some of them are really well educated, but it's still because the paper that they have, because the document, the degree that they have is from overseas, they cannot find better chance of living here. And they end up doing, again, I'm saying, doing the minimum job with the minimum pay that they're getting it here. And still we expect them to function well, to do well without any problem, and then live a normal life. To me, that is a challenge by itself. We need to look more into it. Can we create more programs? Is there anything that we can do it to help these people? And again, and Abraham talked about dignity. This is about dignity as well. Because if someone who walks to your office today, who was a manager, he managed 300 people back in his home country, and here he is, you are placing him to find a job to lift boxes. It is tough, it's hard. And if things could be done to help with this kind of situation, to help build better programs, to help refugees become the people they want to become, whether through education, through mental health, through counseling, this will help a little bit more just to lift up their morals, their spirits, and make them feel that they are respected, they are still dignified.
Thank you, dear Mama. So much good that you said in there, and that was actually going to be one of our questions was, what needs to be done, what kind of programs need to be addressed. I think talking about, mental health, education, and the fact that, if you are a doctor and you're a refugee, that, when you come to the U.S., you could be doing taxi driving, you could be doing a lot of different other things. So I think that's very important things to look at that we often don't see. So thank you for bringing that up. We also have a question from our audience, from Kim. Her question is, do you know people who have stayed as IDPs, so internally displaced people, rather than going to a different country? And how has their experience been different or similar to your own? So I don't know who would like to answer that one first. Morehe, would you like to answer that first?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, of course, living within the country which you belong to is better than living in, a different country. Even though some neighboring African countries, they see you as, African, and they treat you relatively good. But I mean, people who live in IDPs seem to have better life, I guess, than those who live in a refugee camp in neighboring or any other countries. That's number one. Number two, the problem with IDPs is that the, there is no access from like humanitarian organization. For example, in Darfur, there is a lot of Darfuris who live within Darfur, as one of my colleagues here said. He visited those places. The problem is the Sudanese government controls those places, and they won't allow any kind of support to get into those people. So it's a mess because the government would try to push them back, go to where they came from. Those are the challenges people face in IDPs. But I I don't have personal experience living in IDP or I in one of those IDPs. But I would like to hear what my friend has to say about this one because my friend Ibrahim, he has visited those places and he was in contact with people who live in those places. So I would like to hear what his perspective is.
Well, you did talk on something that is very important. That is the aspect of security. It gets very complicated for IDPs. Protecting IDPs can be much more intricate than if you were a refugee, because in a refugee setting there are demarcations. There is a camp that is built, that is protected, and you have all the UN bodies and all the humanitarian partners that are able to access. So there are some sort of virtual walls when you're talking about a refugee camp. Most times in IDP situations, there are settlements, but these settlements are really vulnerable because they don't have the same form of protection. They don't have the same form of recognition. There are still national laws, national politics that govern the individuals that live in this camp. So it becomes a real political game between international community and what the government will allow you to do with IDPs. The initial stages of a conflict, the needs are very similar. They are identical because everyone needs basic food, everyone needs shelter. The only difference is the possibility of an IDP regaining their home is stronger, or the chances for them to get back home to their original community is stronger than if you were a refugee. In a refugee situation, you probably have to wait until all the conflict is over and there is an organized repatriation. Most times in IDP situations, you can go in and out, check what is happening, and figure out for yourself. The resilience within IDP communities is stronger because you have more access to resources and resources that you know or you're familiar with. So if you're an IDP, most of the times you are probably going over to where you either have family ties, extended family, or communities that will be happy to host you, either the same ethnicity, you share the same ethnicity, or the same religion, or stuff like that. So you have much more possibilities of, resilience being created or being formed in the communities among IDPs than you will have in a refugee situation. So these are some of the contrast in refugee and IDP situations.
Thank you. So sorry about that. I dropped out for a second, but and we have, so I know we're coming up on our hour, but this is so interesting, so I want to continue discussing this a little bit more. But I want to open up another question to you all. What do you feel is a common misconception that the general public has about refugees? And I'll start with Dermomo on this.
I would say the general misconception is refugees are always receivers. They always receive. They drain our resources. They drain our economy. All what they do is consuming, and they never ever give, and that's completely wrong.
Would you like to add on to that, Abraham?
I think he touched on a big part, but what I would also say is the fact that refugees have gone through frustrations, but they are not frustrated people. Most times we treat it as if we're a mental case. We're not a mental case. We've just had situations in life. People have gone through very difficult circumstances that led them to being where they are. And one of the things he talked a little bit about, Momo said that we think that refugees will stay and they don't want to go. And I started with this. Every refugee that I know, or for the most part that I know, nobody leaves their country immediately and the first thing they want is a resettlement in the United States or in Canada. No. The first thing is survival, but that's why every refugee situation is in Syria, is in Pakistan, is in everywhere that I have worked. Most times you find when the conflict happens, they don't even want to go away from the border area because they think it will be over tomorrow and they can get back. It's only when things develop and it becomes a protracted situation. So every human being wants to thrive. First you have to survive and then you want to thrive. So they'll look for places where there is that possibility for them to be able to thrive. That's when resettlement or staying over or reintegration thoughts come in. But initially, it is about survival. And like I said, they have gone through frustrated situations, but they are not frustrated people.
Thank you, Abraham. And Morehe, what is a common misconceptions about refugees?
Well, I totally agree with what they just said. I mean, I would add and say, though, refugees are able to turn this frustration into really successful, I don't know, I'm trying to find the word, but I mean, I have seen refugees here in North Dakota, people who come to the States without even knowing how to speak English, without, you know, having this basic need to be part of the community. Within a short period of time, you see them prosper, you see them learn the language within a short period of time, go to school, graduate, and positively contribute to the society. So I think people, as they said, misunderstood refugees, and they think that people just come up here and create more damages and just receive and do all the things. But it's not true. I mean, I came to the States in 2009. I couldn't speak English when I came here. I was able to immediately get a retail job and go to school and graduate. I just graduated from college about 2 to 3 weeks ago. I mean,
congratulations.
Thank you so much. So all refugees looking for is just opportunity. I mean, once there is this opportunity, they can take it. And I think all we need to do is make sure that we provide those opportunities for them. I'm very sure once those opportunities are out there, they're ready to take them and they're ready to be part of the community where they live, and they would definitely contribute positively. So this is just the stereotyping of, you know, they just need. I think it's time to see things in a different way. So refugees are like anybody else who would like to survive, would like to have a good life, would like to positively contribute to the, you know, lives of others, and they would like to be part of the community and all those great things. I mean, I know a lot of people. I was just reading, it was in New York Times, I guess, today, about 80% of the small businesses are started in the States here. Actually, all those businesses are started by like immigrants or kids of immigrants. So they are really hardworking people, and they, as I said, they are able to turn this frustration Abraham was talking about into opportunities and positively contribute. So I hope people see those kind of things and judge people not based on what they hear from different sources, but based on what refugees are doing.
Great, thank you. Okay, so like I said, we're going to start wrapping this up, so I'm going to have one last question for you guys, and I really want to kind of leave it in your hands. So if there's one thing you want people to walk away with, or if there's one thing you want people to know, what would that be? And we're starting with Abraham.
I want people to give back dignity to refugees. We need dignity. Dignity in our identity, dignity in the resources that are put into our hands, to be able to be useful human beings. I want every refugee to be dignified.
Dignity. Thank you, Abraham. And Morehe, one thing you want people to walk away with?
Well, refugees are very hard-working people. Refugees are people who are just looking for opportunities, and they are like anybody else. And this is reality. It's not something that is we wish to see one day. We're living it actually. We are part of the community. We are positively contributing to the community, and we wish people to get to know us as refugees before they jump into judging refugees based on historical false analysis or historical false whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I mean, we are like anybody else, and we're always ready to take opportunities and do good. So
Great, thank you. And Jeramomo, what do you want people to walk away with? What's one thing you'd say?
Yeah, is refugees did not choose to leave their home countries, but they were pushed out of it. Because, for instance, with myself, have I ever planned to leave my country? No. Did I plan to come to US? No, but I was pushed to come here. So what I would love to leave today is that we need to know that these people did not come here to enjoy better life, but they have been pushed from where they were. And I would guarantee you that a lot of them, so many refugees, if you ask them what is better life, they will tell you back home, not here, because it was not their choice to come and live here.
Well, thank you so much, all of you, for coming here and talking today. All of your point of views are absolutely fantastic and diverse, and I cannot tell you how much we appreciate you sharing your stories with us and your thoughts and your views. It was just absolutely fantastic. I know I was inspired. I'm sure everybody watching was as well. So thank you, first of all. Thank you so much, you guys. And also, I want to tell everybody that's watching, again, if you want to be involved in more conversations like this, we have them monthly. Our series is Join the Search on air. And if you want to join the movement and get invited to all of these events and connect with people all over the world, go to endviolentconflict.org and sign the pledge to join the movement. So thank you all, and we'll see you next time.
thank you.
Thank you.